A chilly early autumn morning in 2018 began with an unusual commotion on 10th Avenue in Grinnell, Iowa. Four unmarked investigation vehicles quietly pulled up in front of a modest two-story apartment building in what was normally a peaceful neighborhood. Neighbors peeked through their curtains as DCI agents in tactical gear fanned out, secretly taking positions around the building. Inside apartment 2B, 33-year-old Evan Rourke was preparing breakfast, a routine he had maintained for years as a quiet local worker who kept to himself, rarely socialized, and drew almost no attention. A rapid knock sounded at 7:18 a.m. Evan Rourke, Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 2004 disappearance of Lauren Halden." Officers later described Evan's hand trembling slightly as he set down his coffee mug, yet his face remained unnervingly calm, as if he had known this moment would eventually find him after 14 years of waiting in silence. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the latest cases. In late summer 2004, rural Grinnell, Iowa was wrapped in the distinctive atmosphere of the changing season. Days still blazing hot, but once darkness fell, a damp chill from the endless cornfields swept through the trees lining the dirt roads that led out of town. On the edge of town, a large isolated farm had become a regular hangout spot for local young people. Golden light from the main house spilled into the yard, mixed with laughter, the clink of bottles, and the low hum of music from a small speaker perched on a wooden crate. 18-year-old Lauren Halden was there with friends. She blended into the group, but kept a measured distance, occasionally stepping away to stare into the darkness beyond, as if catching her breath amid the noise. Toward the end of the night, Lauren left the crowd after someone called her name from near the farm gate. That person was Evan Rourke, an acquaintance from the wider friend circle. The two spoke briefly. No one heard what was said, only seeing Lauren nod slightly, her expression hesitant, as though weighing something. Still, she followed Evan, and the two walked straight toward a black pickup truck parked beside the wooden fence outside. Those near the gate only caught glimpses of their silhouettes disappearing as the truck's headlights flicked on. The vehicle pulled away from the yard, crossed the dirt road, and its engine noise faded into the thick night, covering the sprawling fields. That was the last time anyone saw Lauren. As the night wore on and houses went dark, Lauren's family realized she hadn't come home, even though she always let them know if she was staying out. Her phone went unanswered. Text received no reply. Her mother checked her bedroom. The bed was empty, and the jacket she usually took was still in the closet. The growing silence fueled mounting dread. The family called her close friends, but no one knew where Lauren had gone after the gathering. When every reasonable explanation ran out, anxiety turned into real panic, forcing the family to make the final decision: report to authorities that Lauren Halden was missing. The call went to the Grinnell Police Department, and the on-duty unit immediately sent 2 officers to the Halden home to verify the situation and assess the urgency. The small house sat in a quiet residential area, every light on, as if no one in the family could calm down enough to sleep. In the living room, they recounted the evening. Lauren had left home in the late afternoon, saying she was heading to a gathering at the farm outside town with old high school friends and planned to stay only a few hours. Her failure to return, call, or respond to messages was completely out of character, because Lauren always proactively informed her family of any schedule changes. Police recorded all the information, then asked the family to list places Lauren frequented, her closest friends, and anyone she might have contacted that day. From there, officers began reconstructing Lauren's timeline on the day she vanished. She was home in the morning, spent a few afternoon hours at the town library, finishing course registration for the new semester, then returned home to change before leaving for the gathering. The family confirmed they last saw Lauren at the front door as she got into a car, and from that moment on, they received no calls from her. Police requested details about the gathering: who organized it, who was there, the time it took place, and an estimated head count. The The family called a few of Lauren's friends to help compile names, explaining it was a small get-together, mostly local young people who had known each other since high school. From that list, police cross-referenced and identified several people who needed to be contacted quickly to rebuild the evening's timeline. However, one piece of information stood out immediately. Almost everyone the family reached said Lauren had left the gathering with a guy named Evan Rourke. That single detail was enough for police to flag it in the file as a priority for clarification. Evan wasn't one of Lauren's everyday close friends, but the two knew each other through mutual acquaintances. The fact that Lauren left with Evan, coinciding exactly with when she went silent, made him the last person known to have been with her. Before leaving the Halden home, officers completed the initial report, determining that attendees needed to be interviewed first thing the next morning, with primary focus on exactly what happened between Lauren and Evan before they left the farm on the night she disappeared. The following morning, Grinnell Police Department investigators began contacting everyone who had been at the gathering to collect detailed statements and reconstruct the final events before Lauren vanished. The farm lay deep in the countryside, reachable only by a narrow dirt track flanked by trees and endless cornfields. Young people scattered around the area had come for a casual end-of-summer hangout, and because it was just a familiar social event, no one paid close attention to every little thing that happened. Yet when police asked questions systematically, gaps in memory started revealing key details. A group sitting on the porch described Lauren arriving in a normal mood, chatting just enough, neither overly excited nor visibly upset. They said she stepped away from the crowd a few times, looking toward the backyard, as if seeking fresh air or escaping the noise. People near the farm gate said Evan Rourke arrived relatively late, talked to a few acquaintances, but mostly stood alone or watched the group from a distance. One remembered Evan approaching Lauren twice that night, first for a casual hello, the second near the time she left. When asked about the moment Lauren and Evan left, statements began to conflict. Some said they left fairly early compared to the rest of the night, when the music had quieted and people were starting to clean up. Others said they saw the two still there near the end, talking under the porch light before suddenly heading toward the vehicles parked outside the fence. Some insisted Lauren walked ahead and Evan followed. Others said the opposite. Evan led, and Lauren seemed to hesitate. One witness near the gate said Lauren bent down to tie her shoe just before stepping onto the dirt road. Another swore that never happened. Police recorded everything and compared statements against estimated timelines. Trying to connect the descriptions revealed two standout points. First, no one could pinpoint exactly when Lauren and Evan left the farm, partly because no one was watching the clock at a relaxed party with no set schedule. Second, accounts of their interaction varied significantly. A few said Lauren seemed reluctant when Evan approached, while others thought they talked normally with no obvious tension or conflict. These contradictions forced police to note that witnesses likely observed only fragments, lacked full context, or were affected by dim lighting and distance. Still, the one thing every statement agreed on was that Lauren and Evan left the gathering together, heading toward the pickup truck parked on the edge of the property, and from that moment, no one ever saw Lauren again. From the information gathered, police established that Evan being the last person with Lauren was a central fact requiring verification in the next investigative steps. Evan Rourke was brought in for questioning at Grinnell Police Department headquarters that same morning after investigators finished the first round of witness statements at the farm. Sitting in the small interview room, Evan said he arrived at the gathering late because he had been helping with chores at his family's farm and only planned to stop by briefly to see a few people. When asked about Lauren, Evan said they talked a few times that night, mostly about school plans and small friend group stuff. He said Lauren seemed fine, showed no signs of discomfort, and willingly walked out with him. According to Evan, after leaving the party, he drove down the dirt road toward the main highway. At a spot he described as a small trail leading into the woods, Lauren asked to get out and walk for a bit because she felt claustrophobic. Evan insisted he didn't pressure or argue with her. She just said she needed a few minutes alone, and he agreed to let her out there. He then said he turned the truck around, headed back toward town, went straight home, and never contacted Lauren again that night. When investigators pressed for a more specific description of the trail, Evan gave only a vague answer. "It's right after a big curve, near a spot he couldn't quite remember because it was dark, and the trees all looked the same." That detail immediately raised flags, because the rural area around Grinnell, especially near the party farm, has virtually no deep wooded trails matching Evan's description. Additionally, the claim that Lauren asked to get out didn't line up with what friends said. They recalled no mention of her wanting to walk or needing space when she left the gathering. Another red flag: Evan couldn't describe where exactly he turned the truck around. He said he just turned around where it was wide enough. But investigators knew most of those dirt roads are too narrow for an easy U-turn. When asked why he didn't drop Lauren closer to lights or houses, Evan said he didn't think about it and was just doing what she asked. The inconsistencies grew clearer when investigators compared this to Evan's description of Lauren acting normal all evening. If she wasn't upset, there was no reason for her to suddenly want to get out in the middle of nowhere, and nothing in Evan's statement suggested she had mentioned it earlier. Also, when asked about the departure time, Evan gave a window that didn't match most witness accounts. Some said they saw him stay a bit longer after Lauren got in the truck. Evan claimed they left right after stepping outside, but couldn't say how long because he wasn't checking the time. These imprecise details meant Evan's statement couldn't be treated as an immediately verifiable account. Investigators made a list of points requiring field verification: confirm whether the trail he mentioned actually existed, check the width of the dirt road to assess the plausibility of his U-turn claim, and evaluate the overall reasonableness of the entire route he said he took. That field comparison became the critical next step in determining the truthfulness of the statement from the last person known to have been with Lauren before she vanished. Immediately after completing the first round of statements and identifying clear inconsistencies in Evan Rourke's account, the search teams were deployed that same afternoon with the objective of thoroughly sweeping all areas where Evan's statement overlapped with witness statements. The initial search focus was placed on the dirt road connecting from the party farm toward the edge of Rock Creek State Park, an area investigators believed would show signs of Lauren's presence if Evan had truly dropped her off as he described. The search group was divided into 3 smaller teams. One team responsible for sweeping along the main route Evan described, one team tasked with expanding the search into side trails based on witness statements, and a third team using K-9 units to track scent from personal items of Lauren's provided by her family. Investigators were well aware that searching early carried special importance in the critical first hours of a missing person case in a vast rural area with dense trees and unmarked trails. However, they also understood that the inconsistencies in the statements required the search perimeter to be broader than initially planned, adding further challenges to the deployment. ATVs were brought in to extend access into areas unreachable by patrol vehicles, particularly the narrow dirt paths running alongside cornfields and patches of sparse woods. The K-9 units were deployed starting from the farm outward along the dirt road witnesses described as the last place Lauren and Evan were seen. Initially, the dogs did not pick up a clear scent trail due to strong winds the previous night and the dry leaf cover on the ground that easily scattered traces. However, as the search team moved deeper into the thicker area near a second trail, one witness said locals sometimes used as a shortcut to the main road. The K-9 units showed a mild reaction when approaching a patch of ground with surface disturbance. This led to a new, wider search perimeter, prompting investigators to begin closely examining areas with potential for physical evidence. While moving deeper into the not overly dense woods, the second team spotted a dark-colored object lying among the leaf litter and dry branches. Upon closer inspection, they identified it as a backpack that appeared to have been thrown or dropped to the ground with moderate force, enough to twist the zipper pull out of alignment. Based on the family's description, the search team immediately recognized that this was very likely Lauren's backpack. The lead investigator at the scene immediately ordered the discovery location secured with temporary markers, coordinates recorded, and panoramic photos taken before collecting the evidence. The backpack was handled according to proper procedure. Fresh gloves were used, it was placed in a dedicated evidence bag, and movement was minimized to avoid disturbing any potential trace evidence inside or outside. At the scene, there were no clear signs that the backpack had been dragged. It appeared to have fallen straight down or been lightly tossed to the ground. Investigators also noted that the surrounding area showed no distinct footwear impressions beyond a few faint, hard-to-identify prints. The fact that the backpack was found several dozen meters off the trail led the investigation team to focus on two possibilities. Either Lauren dropped the backpack while moving into this area, or someone else carried it here and abandoned it. Since this sparse wooded area was not directly on the route Evan described, but was not far from the trail confirmed by witnesses, the backpack's location heightened the need to expand the search in multiple additional directions. The other search teams continued sweeping the side trails to ensure no area with potential signs of Lauren was missed. Meanwhile, the team responsible for reporting quickly compiled all on-scene information and sent it to command to prepare for in-depth analysis by the investigative unit. After the backpack was sealed and transported back to headquarters for proper evidence processing, police immediately marked this location as a key point on the temporary search map. This map showed possible routes Lauren may have taken based on witness statements, combined with where Evan claimed to have dropped her off and where the backpack was found. This was the first concrete physical discovery in the entire search process, helping reshape investigators' thinking about the direction Lauren may have gone or where she may have been taken. Immediately after the backpack was recovered, the field investigation team returned to the discovery area to conduct a comprehensive analysis aimed at precisely determining the relevant perimeter and searching for secondary traces that could help reconstruct Lauren's movements before she disappeared. The area was in a patch of sparse woods, with ground covered in leaf litter, mixed with dry branches and numerous small clearings between tree trunks, indicating it was not dense forest, but a transitional zone between the trail and thicker woods, deeper inside. The investigation team used measuring tapes, placed small stakes, and created a scene map with a radius of approximately 30 meters around the backpack's location. Initially, they noted slight ground disturbance, mainly leaf litter pushed to the sides in a lateral pattern rather than heavily churned up. About 7 meters from the backpack, they discovered a shallow footwear impression. The soil beneath was not deeply compressed, but the outline was clear enough to identify a small size consistent with Lauren's shoe size, according to family information. This print was not deep enough to indicate strong force, such as running or being pushed. Instead, it had the characteristics of a light step or a simple change of direction while walking. The investigation team searched for additional footwear impressions, but found only a few faint streaks obscured by dry leaves and no continuous trail, indicating Lauren had gone deeper into the woods or fled. This led investigators to consider two possibilities. Lauren may have taken a few short steps into this area before the backpack fell, or the backpack was carried here by someone else and left behind rather than dropping naturally during her movement. One factor that particularly drew the investigation team's attention was that the backpack was not located right next to the trail, but completely off any straight-line path, meaning whoever carried it, whether Lauren or someone else, had deliberately deviated from the usual route. When examining low branches near the backpack, there were no signs of excessive breaking or bending, indicating that if Lauren had entered here, she did not have to push through thick brush, but simply stepped sideways through fairly open spaces. This supported the possibility that she only paused here briefly or accidentally stepped into the area before the backpack fell. However, the investigation team also noted the complete absence of any signs of a struggle. No heavily disturbed soil, no drag marks, no deep imprints from a second set of adult male-sized shoes. This prevented investigators from immediately determining whether this area was the site of an incident or merely where evidence was dropped during movement. They continued documenting other small details, a streak of dry leaves pushed aside in the direction opposite the trail, a few patches of soil with impressions too shallow to identify, and a natural clearing between two tree trunks that could have served as a brief stopping point. All of this data was compiled into a scene diagram with marked points, showing where the backpack was found, the direction of the small footwear impression, and areas of leaf litter disturbance. Based on analysis of the area's structure, the investigation team concluded that this location was likely related to the early stage of the disappearance, but was not the site of any obvious violent event. From the pattern of leaf litter disturbance and the shallowness of the footwear impression, investigators considered the possibility that this area was a temporary stopping point rather than the end of Lauren's journey. Although no direct traces of assault or struggle were present, the fact that the backpack, a significant personal item, was here could not be considered coincidental, especially since it was not on the route Evan described. After completing the analysis of the area where the backpack was found, the investigation team moved on to a field verification based on Evan Rourke's statement to determine how well what he described matched the actual terrain around the Grinnell outskirts. In his statement, Evan claimed the trail where Lauren asked to get out was right after a big curve and described it as a small path leading into sparse woods. When the investigation team conducted the on-site survey, they found that the dirt road from the farm ran fairly straight for a long stretch, with only minor natural bends but absolutely no big curve, as Evan had insisted. Even when examining all nearby side branches, none were wide enough for a pickup truck to easily stop without damaging the grass growing along both sides of the road, something the actual scene also did not show. They further expanded the survey to minor trails and small slopes leading into sparse woods, but found no path matching Evan's description. Those trails were all either too narrow or too overgrown for a mid-size pickup truck to access without leaving clear traces. When testing the possibility of turning the vehicle around as Evan described, the investigation team noted another issue. The section of dirt road where Evan said he turned around was simply not wide enough to perform the maneuver comfortably. Investigators drove a similar vehicle through the area and found that turning around would require multiple backing maneuvers or cutting across soft ground beside the road, which would certainly leave tire ruts or skid marks. The actual scene showed no such traces. This created a clear contradiction between the statement and reality that investigators could not overlook. They remarked the locations Evan described, compared them with county topographic maps and archived satellite imagery from previous years, and confirmed that the surrounding area had changed very little over time, making it highly unlikely that a trail had disappeared or been completely altered. When expanding further into the area near Rock Creek State Park, where Evan said he drove through but didn't remember the road clearly, the investigation team noted that this section was actually quite distinctive, with small signs and two clear intersections. Evan's inability to describe these basic features raised questions about whether he had actually driven through there that night. Based on the entire survey, the investigation team identified at least three major discrepancies. First, the described big curve did not exist. Second, the trail where Evan claimed to have dropped Lauren off did not match any feasible minor route in the area. Third, the road Evan described did not align with the actual layout of the dirt road system around both the farm and the sparse wooded area. These discrepancies were not only geographical, but also related to travel time. When simulating Evan's described route, the actual driving time did not match the estimate he provided in his statement. Investigators redrove the route at a comparable time of day to rule out effects of lighting and traffic density, but the results still showed a significant discrepancy. Recognizing that Evan's statement did not match the physical terrain at multiple key points, the investigation team moved on to evaluating his physical condition to determine whether the observed injuries could be linked to the events on the night Lauren disappeared. During the previous session at the police station, investigators had noticed several small scratches on Evan's neck and forearms, but since that interview focused on the sequence of events and his explanations had not yet been verified, the team only made preliminary notes and scheduled a more thorough examination once sufficient grounds existed. This time, in the follow-up session, They conducted direct observation and photographed the scratches for comparison with Evan's explanation. According to him, the injuries resulted from tripping over an old wooden fence at the farm when he was leaving the gathering. Evan said that due to the uneven ground, he lost his footing and slid slightly, causing his neck and arms to scrape against the rough wooden rails. He emphasized that the injuries had absolutely nothing to do with Lauren or any unusual incident that night. However, upon close examination of the scratches, investigators noted several noteworthy points. First, the direction of the scratches on Evan's neck ran from top to bottom at a slight diagonal, which did not match scrapes from hitting a horizontal or vertical wooden surface like a fence rail. A slide into a fence would typically produce scratches parallel to the wood grain, but the marks on Evan's neck had characteristics more consistent with clawing or downward scratches from a small object. Second, the scratches on Evan's forearms were parallel and relatively straight lines, not the broad, shallow abrasions expected from brushing against rough wood. Some of the lines varied in depth, indicating uneven force, something more commonly seen in fingernail scratches than from an inanimate object. Additionally, the degree of swelling around the scratches was inconsistent with the type of impact Evan described. If he had truly collided with a fence while off balance, the force would typically be stronger and leave wider abrasions or bruising, whereas Evan's marks were thin and sharp-edged. Nevertheless, investigators could not immediately conclude that the injuries resulted from a confrontation or defensive action because the scratches were not distinct enough to pinpoint the exact source. This meant the evaluation had to stop at noting the degree of incompatibility between the statement and the injuries. The investigation team continued questioning Evan about when he sustained the scratches, but Evan gave rather vague answers, saying he didn't remember exactly when, and that he might have slipped against the fence while walking past. When asked if he could point out the exact section of fence that caused the injury, Evan only said the area was dark and he hadn't paid attention. The lack of detail in his responses made his explanation even harder to verify. Another point of note was that the scratches on Evan's body showed no signs of having fully scabbed over, indicating they occurred very close in time to Lauren's disappearance. This was a significant temporal coincidence, though it was not yet evidence. Investigators weighed their findings carefully to avoid unsupported conclusions, as their job required documenting only what could be proven through direct observation. Therefore, they described in the report that the injuries on Evan were not fully consistent with the explanation provided and shared characteristics with scratches caused by a small object or fingernails, while simultaneously emphasizing that there were insufficient grounds to determine the cause of the injuries or directly link them to Lauren's disappearance. The report also stated clearly that these injuries needed to be considered within the overall context of other evidence rather than as an independent factor. The evaluation results showed that Evan's injuries were a point to keep in mind, but were not yet a decisive factor. Investigators concluded that the level of irregularity in Evan's explanation was noteworthy, yet they still lacked the technical basis or physical evidence to determine the true origin of the scratches. After documenting the notable injuries on Evan's body and completing the cross-verification of his statement against the actual terrain, the investigation team determined that it was necessary to expand the scope of analysis to the entire network of trails, dirt roads, and shortcuts surrounding the rural farm area in order to identify the plausible routes Evan might have used on the night Lauren disappeared. The objective of this step was to conduct a systematic assessment that would establish the highest risk areas requiring priority for additional searches, especially given that Evan's statement contained numerous ambiguities and contradictions. The team began by creating a comprehensive map that marked all the dirt roads connecting the party farm to the main highway, along with secondary branches leading into the sparse wooded areas and open fields. This map was compiled using Poweshiek County topographic data combined with information gathered from local residents and individuals familiar with the small agricultural paths commonly used in the area. On the map, the routes were divided into three categories: the main route Evan described by Evan, the secondary routes near areas that residents confirmed were regularly used, and the faint or lesser-known routes that were still accessible by vehicle. When analyzing the main route Evan referenced, the investigators continued to note the previously identified inconsistencies. There was no sharp curve, as described in his statement, no wide trail sufficient for a vehicle to stop without leaving traces, and no location that matched Evan's description of where he dropped Lauren off. As a result, this route was labeled, "does not match the statement," but it was not completely ruled out because the possibility remained that Evan had described it inaccurately or deliberately misrepresented it. Next, the team examined the secondary routes based on witness statements. Several individuals reported having used certain trails as shortcuts to the main road or to reach the sparse woods behind the farm. Although narrow, these paths were wide enough for a mid-size pickup truck if the driver knew the way. When the investigators test drove them, they observed that some routes offered the ability to avoid attention, especially those leading to remote areas with little street lighting and no nearby homes. Because these paths were not mentioned in Evan's statement yet lay along potential travel directions if he had chosen to deviate from the main route, the team marked them as medium to high probability and scheduled for further examination in subsequent searches. In addition, the investigators considered even lesser-known routes. Local residents reported that to the east of the farm, there existed several tracks used for tractors or farm vehicles, unpaved and potentially obscured by tall grass in summer. These routes were not mentioned by witnesses, but geographically, they could lead to secluded spots such as the woods between two farm fields or low-lying areas near bodies of water. This led the team to conclude that if Evan had intentionally avoided normal routes, these were the ones he was most likely to have used. Accordingly, these routes were classified as high priority, even though the likelihood of their matching Evan's statement was low. Once all plausible routes had been identified, the team began cross-referencing information with statements from various witnesses. One witness reported seeing a black pickup truck, matching the description of Evan's vehicle, leave the farm and head straight onto the main dirt road. Another witness stated they saw the couple leave the backyard area and head toward a secondary road that connected to a smaller path. This discrepancy could be due to viewing angle or poor lighting, but it created two entirely different directions of travel and directly affected search area delineation. When compared with on-the-ground data, the team determined that the straight-to-main road route allowed the vehicle to leave the area more quickly, whereas the backyard secondary route led to areas with more concealment opportunities. Therefore, both directions required examination, but the backyard route was rated as more suspicious due to terrain features that facilitated hiding. Another notable point was the lack of consistency in witnesses' statements regarding the time the pair left the farm. Some said Lauren and Evan left earlier, while others said they left only as the gathering was ending. This made it more difficult to pinpoint the window during which Evan could have been traveling. However, this inconsistency helped the investigators identify a new issue. If the departure time did not match, then the travel duration also did not align with Evan's claim that it only took a few minutes before he dropped Lauren off. Based on the entirety of the linked data, the investigation team marked the areas requiring expanded supplementary searches. First were the secondary paths leading into the sparse woods, as these offered the highest likelihood of locating Lauren or additional evidence. Second were the border zones between fields and the edge of the woods, where mixed terrain could preserve movement traces. Third were the low-lying areas near bodies of water, where evidence could have been discarded or washed into. The team also noted that some routes were only accessible by high-clearance vehicles, consistent with the pickup truck Evan owned, thereby increasing the suspicion level of those routes. During the expansion of the search based on the previously established map of suspicious routes, the investigation team deployed multiple small units to sweep each high-priority zone, focusing on secondary trails leading into the sparse woods, low areas adjacent to water, and the gaps between fields and forest edges. This expansion lasted several hours, with coordinated use of ATVs, cadaver dogs, and foot searchers to ensure that small objects concealed by dry leaves or summer grass were not missed. While following a little-known secondary trail located a few hundred meters from where the backpack had been found, one team discovered a small piece of dark green fabric caught on a low branch at about adult waist height. The fragment was small, felt slightly stiff to the touch, tightly woven, and different from ordinary clothing fabric. More importantly, its color did not match the outfit Lauren was described as wearing on the night she vanished. The investigators immediately documented the location, photographed the scene, and carefully removed the fabric, following evidence preservation protocol. As they proceeded into the next wooded section, another team located a light-colored neck gaiter buried under a layer of dry leaves. Despite being soiled, the color and pattern were immediately recognized as matching the description provided by Lauren's family when they submitted her personal belongings list. The gaiter was approximately 10 meters off the trail, not torn, but bearing a dark stain along one edge. The scene team marked it, photographed the overall layout, and collected the item, noting its orientation and degree of coverage for later analysis of whether it fell naturally or was placed. Continuing along a nearby road, a third team found a black plastic fragment near a harder-packed section of ground, right at the transition between the dirt road and a smaller path leading deeper into the woods. The piece was roughly palm-sized, slightly curved, with a clean break along the edges as though snapped or struck hard. An investigator experienced in motor vehicle crime scenes recognized that the shape could belong to a door handle cover or trim piece from an older model pickup truck. Since Evan owned a truck of that same generation, the discovery was considered potentially significant, although no definitive connection could be concluded without technical analysis. All collected evidence, the Lauren's gaiter, the unknown dark green fabric, and the plastic fragment, was sealed according to protocol, placed in separate specialized bags, and labeled with exact location, time, and recovering officer. The items were further protected in individual containers to prevent cross-contamination and transferred via chain of custody form to the Poweshiek County Evidence Storage. In 2004, trace and DNA analysis technology was not yet advanced enough to deeply evaluate small items such as fabric fibers or plastic fragments. Touch DNA techniques were still in early development and not widely available at the county level. Consequently, the team could only document, preserve, and await possible future analysis rather than draw immediate forensic conclusions. Even Lauren's gaiter, despite visible staining that might yield additional information about her movements, could not be examined in detail at that time. The investigators therefore had to rely on the geographic location and spatial distribution of the items rather than chemical or biological analysis. The fact that 3 separate items were found at 3 different locations, all within the network of suspicious routes, strengthened the conclusion that Lauren or her belongings had been present in those areas on the night she disappeared. Despite the proper collection and sealing of these additional items, Lauren's gaiter, the unknown fabric, and the plastic fragment, possibly from an older pickup truck, the continued ground searches over the following days yielded no further significant discoveries. The sweep teams continued checking woodland borders, secondary paths, low depressions where debris could accumulate, and sections along the water's edge of Rock Creek State Park, but they encountered only natural animal signs and unrelated soil disturbances. The absence of a clear footprint trail, or any item definitively tied to Lauren's continued presence, left the reconstruction of her travel route at an impasse. The investigators re-examined every witness statement and every field note, but the degree of contradiction in minor details, departure time, Lauren's and Evan's demeanor, and the direction the truck took prevented the overall picture from cohering into a verifiable sequence. When they returned to the secondary routes and widened the search radius, the results remained the same. No signs of a struggle, no torn clothing, no indication Lauren had proceeded deeper into any sector. In prolonged rural missing person cases with terrain like that around Grinnell, the chance of recovering physical evidence drops sharply after the first 48-72 hours, especially if heavy rain or strong wind erases traces. As predicted, the passage of time only made remaining clues more faint. The 2 weeks following Lauren's disappearance were marked by multiple large-scale searches coordinated among police, rescue teams, volunteers, and local residents familiar with the terrain. Each operation targeted new zones or rechecked previously searched areas to rule out oversights, yet the outcome remained empty. Concurrent re-evaluation of Evan's statements produced no new leads. The investigators searched for any direct evidence that could confirm he had been with Lauren at a specific location after leaving the farm, but beyond the terrain description contradictions and several hard-to-explain injuries, no legally sufficient basis existed to file charges. Without a body, without a witness who saw Lauren after she left the party, and without a clearly definable crime scene, the entire case gradually entered what investigators term a gray area. The recovered items, particularly the plastic fragment and unknown fabric, held potential value, but in 2004 advanced DNA touch or material comparison techniques were beyond the capabilities of local agencies. The items, therefore, could not be tested for cellular material, latent prints, or precise material origin. As 2005 progressed, new tips dwindled to virtually zero. The monthly investigation unit reports repeated the same reality: no physical evidence, no new leads, no additional witnesses, and no confirmed travel route for Lauren after leaving the farm. By mid-2006, after numerous review meetings and consultations, the case was officially downgraded to low-activity status before being transferred to Poweshiek County's cold case inventory. The file was moved to archives alongside other unresolved cases, the evidence preserved under standard conditions, and all investigative paperwork sealed according to procedure. This decision reflected not only the prolonged deadlock, but also the fact that, despite months of effort, the authorities had been unable to take even one additional step toward the truth of Lauren Halden's disappearance. In 2018, more than a decade after Lauren Halden's file was placed in cold case status, the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation launched a statewide program to review backlogged cases in order to identify those suitable for reinvestigation using modern forensic technology. The program was established amid nationwide adoption by laboratories of next-generation DNA analysis methods, particularly touch DNA techniques, that enabled re-examination of evidence previously considered exhausted. While screening hundreds of cold cases, the review team quickly focused on Lauren's file for two standout reasons. The evidence had been properly preserved for many years, and the original 2004 investigation documented multiple suspicions surrounding the last person seen with the victim, yet lacked the technical means to test them at the time. The presence of multiple discrete items, backpack, gaiter, unknown fabric, and plastic fragment possibly linked to a motor vehicle, made the case ideal for application of new analytical methods. The decision to select the Lauren Halden case was made during an internal DCI meeting, based on the assessment that despite the long interval, the chain of evidence remained intact, properly sealed, and free of contamination, offering a strong opportunity to extract new information. Immediately after the case was returned to the priority docket, the DCI cold case team began retrieving all related materials from Poweshiek County archives, including 2004 field reports, search area maps, original witness and Evan Rourke interview transcripts, all crime scene photographs, and the initial route diagrams. The entire file was digitized for systematic analysis and cross-checked against updated topographic maps to determine whether the sparse woods, trails, and secondary routes present in 2018 remained largely unchanged. At this stage, the team confirmed that most relevant locations retained their original geographic structure, particularly the sites where evidence had been recovered, making correlation with old data feasible. The original evidence items were transferred from storage to the DCI laboratory under strict chain of custody controls. Technicians inspected the seals, confirmed the bags were intact, the evidence tags undisturbed, and the inventory numbers matched the log. The backpack was examined first, followed by Lauren's gaiter, the dark green fabric, and the plastic piece. Each item was re-photographed using high-resolution equipment to assess degradation and remaining viability for trace analysis. Parallel to the evidence review, the cold case team conducted a complete rereading of all original witness statements, reorganizing events chronologically and highlighting contradictions or unresolved points in preparation for re-evaluation. Particular attention was paid to Evan's statement, where numerous details about routes and terrain failed to match reality. These discrepancies were designated as the central focus because modern technology could now provide tools to either verify or refute the points that had previously caused impasse. Once all documents, maps, and physical evidence were assembled, the team prepared a formal case reactivation file that detailed the reasons for selection, current evidence condition, key outstanding suspicions, and the specific technical analyses planned. This reactivation not only opened access to far more advanced forensic methods, but also enabled a fresh overall reassessment of the events of the night. Lauren disappeared, overcoming the technological limitations that the 2004 investigation could not been able to surmount. When the case reactivation process was completed and all evidence from 2004 was transferred back to the Iowa DCI laboratory, the forensic team immediately began the most critical analytical step, testing for touch DNA on the green fabric fiber found caught on a branch near the sparse wooded area. This was evidence that, at the time of collection, investigators had been unable to fully exploit due to technological limitations, but by 2018, touch DNA had become a standard method capable of recovering biological traces from surfaces containing only an extremely small number of cells. Before proceeding with testing, technicians re-examined the sealing condition of the evidence bag, confirming that the fiber had been stored in a dry environment, protected from direct light, and had never been opened since it was sealed in 2004. They used specialized magnifying glasses to observe the fiber's structure, determining that the sample had sufficient surface area suitable for collecting epidermal cells while avoiding damage to the structure during handling. The analysis began with the sample extraction process. The fabric fiber was placed on a sterile surface under filtered air conditions with near-zero contamination levels. Technicians used specialized adhesive tape to collect cells, then proceeded to amplify the DNA using the PCR method. Notably, touch DNA does not always yield usable results, especially when evidence has been exposed to the natural environment for an extended period, as in this case. However, the technicians reported that the sample taken from the frayed edge of the fiber still retained enough cells for successful gene amplification. After many hours of processing, the laboratory obtained a clear DNA marker profile sufficient for database comparison. When the sample was compared against Iowa's stored DNA records, the forensic investigation team immediately detected a high-level match with the markers from Evan Rourke's DNA profile, which had been collected in 2004 during fingerprinting and biological sampling as part of the initial investigation procedure. The match was nearly perfect at key loci, exceeding the minimum threshold required to conclude that the epidermal cells on the fiber belonged to Evan. This result was cross-verified through 2 independent analyses to rule out laboratory cross-contamination or sample error. Both analyses produced the same set of markers matching Evan's profile, completely eliminating any doubt about procedural error. For the investigation team, this was the breakthrough they had never achieved during the many years the case remained frozen. The green fabric fiber, which had previously been stored only with the slim hope that it might one day be analyzable, now became the first scientific evidence directly linking Evan Rourke to the area where Lauren was last indicated to have been on the night she disappeared. More importantly, the location where the fiber was found was not near the route Evan had described, but in a completely different area, proving he had been present in a place he denied ever visiting. This demolished the entire core of Evan's statement, which hinged on the claim that he had only dropped Lauren off at a trailhead and never went deeper into the woods. The DNA result made Evan's presence in the area where the fiber was discovered virtually certain and raised questions about why evidence linked to him was found in a location that matched none of his descriptions throughout the investigation. The DNA report was prepared in detail, clearly outlining the sampling procedure, analysis process, marker results, statistical reliability, and degree of match with Evan's profile. The laboratory also included magnified images of the fiber area showing cells adhered to the surface to ensure every step could be independently verified. When the cold case investigation team received the official report, they marked it as the first direct scientific evidence in nearly 14 years capable of establishing that Evan was not only connected to Lauren before her disappearance, but was also present in the key area where the evidence was found. This evidence, for the first time, revealed a clear link between Evan and the scene, far surpassing the initial level of suspicion that had primarily rested on inconsistencies in his statements and unexplained injuries. The successful touch DNA match allowed the Lauren Halden case to finally escape the long-standing deadlock and opened a new investigative direction focused on Evan's role on the night the victim vanished, while providing the solid scientific foundation that authorities had previously been unable to obtain. After the touch DNA result on the green fiber established Evan's presence in an area he had denied ever entering, the cold case team continued expanding analysis to other pieces of evidence, with Lauren's backpack becoming the next focus because it had the potential to retain environmental traces that could not be analyzed in 2004. The backpack was taken to the Iowa DCI Mineralogy and Geology Laboratory, where technicians used polarizing microscopes and microsampling systems to collect soil particles adhering to seams, edges, and the bottom of the bag. Soil samples were taken from multiple locations to ensure representativeness, especially from the outer bottom of the backpack, where the thickest soil accumulation was present, and from fabric folds where soil tends to collect if the bag briefly contacted the ground. After collection, technicians conducted mineral analysis using methods to identify silica composition, metal oxides, clay particles, and grain structure to characterize the soil type. The dark brown particles with a fine coating indicated the presence of elite and smectite minerals, both common in soils near gently flowing water or floodplain areas. At the same time, they noted that the quartz and feldspar particle ratios in the backpack soil were lower than those typical of soils around the farm area, which consisted mainly of sandy alluvial soil with less clay content. This led the analysis team to suspect that the backpack may have contacted soil near a water source or an area with distinct sedimentary characteristics. To verify this, investigators compared the backpack soil samples with a series of reference samples collected from key locations in the original case file. The area near the farm, the dirt road where Evan claimed to have stopped the vehicle, the sparse woods where the backpack was found, and the area along the Skunk River, a waterway located a few miles southeast of the discovery site. These reference samples were analyzed in parallel for mineral composition, grain structure, and color characteristics under microscopy. The results showed that the soil on Lauren's backpack matched significantly with samples taken from the Skunk River bank area, which exhibited dark brown color, high illite smectite content, and fine-grained structure with slight cohesiveness, completely different from the soil structure of both the farm area and the wooded site where the evidence was discovered. The degree of match was strong enough to rule out random coincidence, as Skunk River area soil has distinctive water sediment characteristics not common in other Grinnell area soils. This created a new contradiction throughout his statements. Evan had insisted that he never took Lauren anywhere near a water source or floodplain, and that the only road he drove was the dirt road leading to the main highway. Yet if Lauren's backpack carried soil matching the Skunk River area, it meant the backpack had brief contact with that location or had been placed there before being moved. The cold case team considered the possibility that the backpack was moved from another location to the original discovery site, but that only heightened suspicion because evidence cannot appear in two geologically distinct areas without human intervention. When the mineral report was finalized, DCI confirmed that the soil on the backpack was more consistent with the Skunk River area than any other location within the search radius. This opened a new investigative avenue related to a location Evan had denied visiting and further reinforced the conclusion that his statements did not reflect the actual events of the night Lauren disappeared. The investigation team noted in their report that the soil analysis result was a crucial piece of the puzzle, not only helping identify areas where Lauren or her belongings had been present, but also providing objective evidence that contradicted Evan's account, moving the case into a new phase of assessment regarding his presence in an area entirely outside the route he claimed. When the soil mineral analysis showed that Lauren's backpack had contacted the Skunk River area, a location completely at odds with Evan's statements, the cold case team recognized the need to expand evaluation to passive data sources capable of recording the victim's movements on the night she vanished. Among the records previously deemed unusable, in 2004, cell tower data from the carrier became a critical source of information thanks to modern analytical methods that allowed recovery and interpretation of what had once been considered fragmented data. In 2004, telecommunications companies did not yet provide real-time location services, but they still retained records of mobile devices connecting to cell towers. Although these records lacked the precision of GPS, they could still identify the coverage sector in which a phone performed connection activity, thereby reconstructing part of the victim's route. Iowa DCI sent a request to Lauren's carrier to recover all ping data from the day she disappeared. After processing at the storage center, the carrier provided a dataset containing automatically recorded connection points when Lauren's phone attempted to maintain network contact. Although her phone did not send messages or make calls after leaving the farm, the device continued pinging the nearest towers by default operation. This data included the estimated time of each ping, tower ID, and corresponding coverage sector. The DCI technical team used modern mapping analysis systems to plot each ping to its geographic location. First, they cross-referenced the 2004 tower map with the current map to check for changes. Results showed that most towers remained in the same locations or had only been upgraded in power, so the original data could be used with reasonable accuracy. When reconstructing the connection route, investigators discovered that Lauren's phone pinged a tower covering the southeast Grinnell area near the Skunk River during a time frame that overlapped with the period Evan claimed he had dropped Lauren off at a trail near the farm. This was the first finding from cell tower data that directly refuted Evan's most important statement that Lauren never went far from the farm area and only exited the vehicle in a nearby wooded section. The tower that recorded Lauren's phone signal was not within the coverage area of the farm or the side trails police had previously searched, but rather in the riverbank zone where the backpack soil had originated. By analyzing signal strength and direction, the technical team determined that Lauren's device most likely traveled through the Skunk River vicinity before losing signal entirely. To ensure accuracy, technicians ran 2004 coverage simulations using the original tower power and antenna height parameters. The simulation results showed that Lauren's phone signal could only have been recorded if the device was within a narrow radius extending along the riverbank. It could not have appeared if she had simply been standing at the trailhead Evan described. This led investigators to realize that Lauren's phone had been taken away from the farm area in a completely different direction, moving toward the location Evan denied ever visiting. The team continued cross-referencing the cell tower data with witness statements about when Lauren and Evan left the gathering. Minor time discrepancies among witnesses, which had previously complicated the original timeline, now became easier to explain once the ping data showed Lauren's phone moving far faster than Evan's repeated description of only driving a short distance before letting Lauren out. This forced the investigation team to conclude that either Evan was deliberately minimizing the distance he traveled that night, or he had completely misrepresented the route and timing. When combining the cell tower data with area maps, the cold case team reconstructed a new timeline. Lauren and Evan left the farm in a direction that did not match his statement. The vehicle traveled far enough for Lauren's phone to ping the riverside tower before losing signal, and there was no indication the phone ever returned toward the farm or nearby areas. This timeline, based on objective data, directly contradicted every description Evan provided. In their internal report, the technical team clearly stated that Lauren's phone signal appeared in an area Evan insisted he had never visited, and that the recorded travel time from the pings was incompatible with any version of his account. For the first time, authorities had an independent location source, proving Lauren had been in the Skunk River area before disappearing, powerfully strengthening the chain of evidence contradicting Evan's statements and moving the case a significant step forward from the ambiguity that had persisted since 2004. When the cell tower data indicated that Lauren's phone had appeared in the Skunk River coverage area, a location completely inconsistent with Evan's account, the cold case team continued re-examining all 2004 witness reports to see if any information had previously been overlooked or undervalued. During this review, they discovered a very brief noted report. A resident living near the intersection of the Farm Dirt Road and the route leading to the low riverbank land reported seeing a pickup truck pass by on the night Lauren disappeared. At the time, police could not verify it because the witness could not recall the license plate, and with no body, no physical traces, and no connecting factors, the report was deemed insufficient for investigation and quickly relegated to an appendix in the file. By 2018, as new scientific evidence successively placed Evan in areas he had denied, this old witness report suddenly became significant. DCI recontacted the witness, a middle-aged man living in a small house less than a mile from the riverbank, for a new interview using modern information elicitation techniques and with much clearer context. When questioned, he stated that on the night Lauren disappeared, he was awakened in the middle of the night by an engine sound coming from the dirt road behind his house. He looked out the window and saw a dark-colored pickup truck driving toward the low land near the Skunk River. Although he could not clearly see the plate or identify the driver at the time, he still remembered the general appearance of the vehicle. A mid-size pickup, single cab, long bed, the type commonly seen in rural Iowa in the early 2000s. In 2004, because pickup trucks were extremely common and the witness only observed for a few seconds, the statement was not considered particularly valuable. But in 2018, investigators asked the witness to describe in greater detail the body style, cab lines, overall color, and taillight cluster shape. Once the description was fully documented, the technical team entered the information into a vehicle model comparison database by production year. The description matched several early 2000s pickup lines, including the exact truck Evan owned, a mid-size black pickup with the same cab design and taillight style, the witness recalled. To increase reliability, investigators retrieved 2004 photos of Evan's truck from the original file, then showed the witness digitally adjusted images simulating nighttime lighting conditions. When the witness saw the photos, he could not state with absolute certainty, but he confirmed the similarity was strikingly close, especially the taillight shape and rear bumper, details he remembered because of the way the light reflected off the road as the truck drove away. For the first time in over 14 years, an independent witness confirmed seeing a vehicle with characteristics matching Evan's truck in the river area during the same time frame as Lauren's phone ping. The investigation team determined this was no longer an isolated coincidence, but a critical link connecting objective data with human testimony. To further strengthen the conclusion, DCI cross-checked 2004 vehicle registration records in the area. Results showed that the number of vehicles matching Evan's exact model and color within a several-mile radius of the Skunk River at that time was very low, further reducing the likelihood of random coincidence. The final report confirmed that an independent witness had seen a truck very similar to Evan's in the area now directly tied to Lauren's movements on the night she disappeared. This became one of the most important pieces of evidence, confirming Evan's presence in a location he had denied for years and clarified the contradictory picture already rebuilt through terrain, mineral, and cell signal analysis. When all the puzzle pieces, from DNA analysis, soil-mineral comparison, cell tower data, and additional witness statements, converged on a single point, Evan's presence in the area along the Skunk River on the night Lauren disappeared. The Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation decided to summon Evan Rourke for a new interview, the first time since 2004 that he would have to face a series of scientific evidence he could no longer easily deny. The interview took place at DCI headquarters in a modern recording-equipped interview room. Evan was invited under the guise of cooperating with the investigation, but the investigators had prepared the full case file to closely observe his attitude, reactions, and the consistency of his statements in light of the new data. In the opening phase, the investigators let Evan recount the entire sequence of events from the night Lauren vanished exactly as he had in 2004 to see whether he would stick to his original story or add or omit details after so many years. Evan repeated the familiar version. He arrived late to the gathering, talked with Lauren, drove away from the farm, and dropped her off at a trail because she wanted to walk. However, when asked to describe the exact location of the trail or the distance from the farm to that spot, he continued to provide the same vague descriptions that matched his initial statement, but still did not correspond to any real-world location. Instead of immediately challenging him, the team presented the evidence piece by piece in sequence, starting with the touch DNA recovered from the green fabric. They explained the analysis process, the degree of match with Evan's DNA, and the location where the item was found in the sparse woods, completely different from the area he claimed he stopped the vehicle. When asked why his DNA was on fabric found in a place he insisted he had never been, Evan awkwardly suggested he might have accidentally touched something of Lauren's at the party and the fabric fell from her clothing. The investigators noted this explanation as unrealistic because the cloth was caught on a branch higher than ground level and did not match any garment Lauren was wearing that night. As Evan began showing signs of discomfort, the investigators moved to the second piece of evidence, the soil mineral analysis on Lauren's backpack. They presented the lab report showing that the soil stuck to the backpack matched samples from the Skunk River area, a location he had denied visiting for 14 years. Evan responded that he had no idea why the backpack would have soil from that region and suggested someone else might have taken the backpack there, but the contradiction became obvious when the investigators asked why the backpack was ultimately found in woods near the farm, not near the river. Evan had no reasonable answer. Next, the investigators presented the cell tower data. When Evan heard that Lauren's phone had pinged towers along the Skunk River during the exact time he claimed he was heading back to town, he appeared surprised, but tried to deny it. He argued the signal could have been deflected or there might have been a recording error. However, the technical team had prepared a 2004 coverage simulation proving the ping could not have occurred unless the device was physically in the river area. Faced with this data, Evan became defensive, refused to answer directly, and asked to refresh his memory, which the investigators noted as a strong indicator that he was highly likely to change his story. When the additional witness was introduced, the resident near the dirt road intersection, who confirmed seeing a pickup truck matching Evan's heading toward the Skunk River flats that night, Evan continued to deny it, saying it could have been someone else's truck. The team immediately produced 2004 photographs of his vehicle for the witness to compare, along with a report showing very few pickup trucks in the county matched Evan's make, model, and color. Evan's continued denials, as objective evidence mounted one after another, led the investigators to clearly document that he was altering his account incrementally with each new piece of proof rather than offering a single consistent narrative. After hours of confrontation, Evan offered his first revised version. He admitted he might have gotten lost and driven farther than intended, but still denied reaching the river area. When pressed on why the physical evidence and phone pings matched that location, he shifted to a second version. Maybe Lauren asked him to drive a little farther before getting out. When asked why he never mentioned this in 2004, he said he didn't want the hassle. These constant changes were recorded by the team as proof that Evan's statements were unreliable. By the end of the session, under the weight of the unbroken chain of evidence and inexplicable contradictions, Evan could no longer maintain his original account. DCI formally designated him the central suspect in Lauren Halden's disappearance, marking a critical shift from someone previously considered merely a person of interest to a subject directly implicated in events he had tried to conceal for years. Following the 2018 interview, in which Evan Rourke repeatedly changed his story and could not explain any part of the objective evidence chain, Iowa DCI compiled all scientific data and logical timeline elements to assess whether sufficient legal grounds existed to request an arrest warrant. The investigative report was systematically drafted, beginning with the touch DNA result on the green fabric, the first and most direct evidence placing Evan in an area completely at odds with the route he had described for 14 years. The next section presented the soil mineral analysis from Lauren's backpack, proving the pack had contact with Skunk River area soil, a place Evan steadfastly denied visiting. The report then incorporated the cell tower data, Lauren's phone pings on the night she vanished, confirming her device had been within the unique coverage zone found only along the river, impossible to reconcile with the drop-off point Evan claimed. This synthesis emphasized the connection among three independent sources: DNA, soil minerals, and cell data, all pointing to the same geographic area and directly contradicting Evan's statements. In parallel, the report included the additional witness who positively identified a truck matching Evan's heading toward the river the night Lauren disappeared, adding a human element to the data chain. Taken as a whole, DCI concluded these were no longer isolated coincidences, but a tightly interlinked system of evidence that supported one another and formed an unbreakable logical sequence. Lauren was present along the Skunk River before she vanished. Her backpack bore distinctive riverbank soil. Secondary physical evidence bearing Evan's DNA appeared in nearby sparse woods, and Evan could offer no plausible explanation for the contradictions between his statements and the scientific data. At this level of suspicion, the investigative team forwarded the file to DCI's legal unit to evaluate grounds for an arrest warrant. The legal unit reviewed each piece of evidence and determined first, clear proof existed that Evan had made multiple materially false statements. Second, physical evidence placed him in locations he denied ever visiting. And third, the pattern reflected deliberate concealment, meeting the legal standard to treat him as a suspect directly involved in Lauren's disappearance. Based on these findings, DCI prepared and submitted a warrant application to the appropriate court in Poweshiek County, accompanied by all technical reports and supporting analyses. Approval involved multiple closed-door reviews to ensure legality and evidentiary solidity, given the case's age and the need for indisputable grounds. In late 2018, after review by the judge handling major cases, the arrest warrant for Evan Rourke was signed and forwarded to the execution team in Des Moines, where Evan was living. On a cold afternoon, officers approached him in the parking lot of his apartment complex and took him into custody without incident or resistance. The execution of the warrant marked the first time in 14 years that the Lauren Halden case entered the criminal prosecution phase, with Evan Rourke formally arrested based on the clear chain of scientific and logical evidence gathered by DCI during the reinvestigation. Immediately after his arrest in Des Moines, Evan Rourke was transported to the Poweshiek County Detention Facility for formal questioning as a suspect. The interview took place in DCI's recorded room under the supervision of the cold case team that had worked the Halden file for months. This time, unlike the previous session, Evan no longer had the option to leave at will, and the legal landscape had completely changed. He now faced every piece of evidence DCI had painstakingly collected. Touch DNA on the green fabric, soil mineral analysis on Lauren's backpack, cell tower records, placing Lauren's phone along the Skunk River, the independent witness who saw Evan's truck that night, and the 14-year pattern of inconsistencies in his own statements. In the early stage, Evan maintained his familiar defensive posture, insisting he had nothing to do with Lauren's disappearance and that every match between the evidence and his presence was a misunderstanding. However, as the investigators methodically presented each item again, Evan gradually lost the ability to maintain a coherent explanation. They started with the touch DNA report. Evan tried to dismiss it, saying he didn't understand forensic science and the result could be wrong. But when shown that the DNA came from fabric snagged on a branch in an area he swore he never entered, he fell into prolonged silence. The investigators then moved to the soil analysis, proving Lauren's backpack had been in contact with Skunk River soil, far outside every route he had ever described. Evan said he had no idea how that soil got there. But when asked why the backpack was later found in woods near the farm rather than the river, he again had no rational answer. Next came the cell tower evidence, complete with a 2004 coverage map demonstrating Lauren's phone could only have pinged the river towers if it was physically near the river. Evan claimed phones can glitch, but the technicians had cross-checked and proved the signals were consistent only with the river location. When asked why, in 14 years, he never once mentioned driving beyond the farm area, he replied only that he didn't remember or didn't think it was important. Answers the team noted as psychologically inconsistent with actual innocence. Finally, the investigators presented the independent witness who saw a pickup matching Evans heading toward the Skunk River Flats the night Lauren vanished. Confronted with 2004 photos of his own truck and the witness's comparison description, Evans stammered that a lot of trucks look alike. Yet, vehicle registration records showed almost no other trucks in the county matched the make, model, color, and year, making coincidence virtually impossible. At this point, Evans shifted to evasion, repeatedly asking for breaks, but the interviewers continued pressing each contradiction between his original story and the current data. When every piece of evidence was laid out in an unbreakable logical sequence, Evan began to break. He sat with his head down, avoided eye contact, and sighed in silence. The investigators did not pressure him to confess guilt, but made clear there were no remaining gaps to hide in. His DNA was in the woods, river soil, on Lauren's belongings, phone signals showing a route he denied, and an independent witness placing his truck at the critical location. After a long silence, Evans spoke in a tired voice, saying this has gone too far to keep lying. Even then he tried to minimize, claiming what happened wasn't planned, and he never thought it would end this way. He hesitated repeatedly before providing details, but when asked directly, "Where is Lauren?" he paused, closed his eyes, and said he could take them to where he hid her body. He described an area along the woods, not far from the Skunk River, in a narrow strip between two dense clusters of trees where no one would accidentally walk. Evans stated that after Lauren lost consciousness, he panicked, carried her there that night, dug a shallow grave with his hands and an improvised tool near the tree line, and covered it with leaves and branches. Using his directions, DCI immediately assembled a professional excavation team, together with crime scene forensics and terrain coordinators. The route to the location Evan described matched both the cell tower analysis and soil characteristics, further corroborating his statement. At the site, the team identified an area of unnaturally compressed soil. After clearing surface leaves and topsoil, they located the remnants of a long-concealed burial pit. Excavation proceeded carefully to preserve any remaining structure and recover potential evidence. Lauren's remains were located at shallow depth, consistent with Evans' description. Despite years of natural decomposition, the location, body position, and surviving personal items confirmed this was the victim missing since 2004. All new evidence, fabric scraps, buttons, a hair tie, and soil samples, was collected, sealed, and sent for laboratory analysis. With the recovery of the body and evidence from the burial site, Evans' post-arrest interview provided the final missing link, closing the years-long search and establishing a truth that had been hidden for far too long. After Lauren Halden's body was exhumed and all the new physical evidence recovered from the wooded area near the Skunk River was sent to the laboratory, the formal prosecution process was initiated. The Poweshiek County Attorney's Office, working in coordination with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, DCI, conducted a full review of the case file to determine the most appropriate charge under Iowa law. Based on the existing evidence, particularly the factors showing that Lauren had been taken to a remote location against her will, the prosecution decided to charge Evan Rourke with kidnapping in the first degree, an offense that, under Iowa statute, includes cases where the victim is confined, removed, or abducted, and that confinement or removal results in death. This charge accurately reflected the nature of the incident. Lauren did not voluntarily leave the safe area, and Evan's actions, according to the logical chain established by the investigation, were the direct cause of her death. The prosecution's preparation began with organizing the evidence in chronological order and by strength of connection. First was the touch DNA on the blue fabric, the cornerstone of the entire case, because it not only proved Evan's presence in the wooded area, but also placed him at a location he had denied visiting for 14 years. Next was the mineral soil analysis on Lauren's backpack, showing the pack had been in contact with the Skunk River area, a place Evan claimed he had never been. When combined with cell tower data, prosecutors could demonstrate that Lauren's phone had traveled in that direction before going completely silent. This established an undeniable fact: the route Lauren took after leaving the farm did not match any of Evan's descriptions of that night's events. The chain of evidence was further strengthened by the statement of an independent witness who saw a vehicle matching Evan's driving toward the clearing near the Skunk River on the night Lauren disappeared. In 2004, that statement had been considered insufficient, but by 2018, when cross-referenced with vehicle registration records by year and model, it matched Evan's truck perfectly. Finally, the pinnacle of the evidence was the fact that Evan himself led investigators to the exact location where Lauren's body was buried, a secluded farm field hidden among dense clusters of trees. No matter how much Evan tried to minimize his responsibility, his precise knowledge of the burial site could not be explained in any way other than that he was the person who put her body there. Prosecutors concluded that Evan's entire course of conduct, making false statements, misleading the investigation, concealing the body, and abandoning Lauren in a remote location, constituted clear proof of kidnapping resulting in death under the law. When the trial opened at the Poweshiek County District Court, the prosecution presented the full chain of evidence in the exact order of the investigation, from the first items recovered in 2004 to the new discoveries in 2018, and finally, to Evan's own statements during his post-arrest interrogation. A reconstructed route map was shown to the jury, clearly illustrating that Evan's vehicle had entered the river area where the fabric containing his DNA was found, completely contradicting his claim that he only drove a short distance and let Lauren out. Prosecutors also displayed a simple simulation showing that Lauren's cell tower pings could only have occurred in the single area around the Skunk River, eliminating any possibility of the technical error Evan had previously claimed. DCI'd laboratory experts testified, explaining the trace DNA analysis process, the soil mineral comparison procedure, and the cell tower coverage modeling. They confirmed every step of the process and emphasized that all evidence samples had been properly preserved for many years, minimizing any risk of contamination. In addition, the independent witness was called to court and recounted seeing the pickup truck heading toward the river clearing on the night of the incident. Although the witness could not recall the license plate, he confirmed the truck's appearance perfectly matched the vehicle Evan used to drive. Prosecutors supplemented this with statistical reports showing the extremely low probability of a matching vehicle in the area. Finally, the most critical portion was the testimony of the detectives who directly participated in Evan's 2018 interrogation. They described how Evan changed his story with each new piece of evidence, his obvious confusion when confronted, and the moment he led them to the burial site, an action that could not be reconciled with any claim of innocence. The defense attempted to argue that Lauren's death may have been an accident and that Evan had simply panicked, but prosecutors countered that every detail of Evan's journey, from taking Lauren to the remote location, creating false trails, burying the body, to consistently lying for 14 years, demonstrated consciousness of guilt and the unlawful confinement of the victim against her will. As the trial moved to jury deliberations, the jurors had a complete picture of the case, Lauren left the gathering with Evan. Her phone traveled toward the Skunk River. Her backpack contained soil from the river area. Fabric with Evan's DNA appeared in the woods. A witness saw Evan's truck, and Lauren's body was buried exactly where all the forensic data pointed. After many hours of closed discussion, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Evan Rourke was guilty of first-degree kidnapping, resulting in the death of Lauren Halden. The court imposed sentence based on the severity of the conduct, the prolonged concealment of the body, and Evan Rourke's deliberate inconsistencies over many years. Evan was sentenced to 50 years in prison, a term that reflected not only the consequences to the victim, but also the lasting impact on Lauren's family and the Grinnell community. The sentence affirmed that no matter how much time passes, crimes concealed by false statements and evasion of responsibility can still be exposed when forensic technology is powerful enough to exploit the remaining traces of evidence. Following the trial, the Iowa DCI released a comprehensive report summarizing the entire investigation process, documenting the transformation from a stalled missing person case into a solved homicide through the combination of traditional investigative techniques and next-generation forensic science. The report noted that the original 2004 investigation, while thorough by the standards of that time, lacked the analytical tools needed to derive value from items such as the fabric, the soil on the backpack, or the cell tower records. That limitation allowed Evan Rourke to escape tight suspicion and caused Lauren's file to be reclassified as a cold case in 2006. Only when touch DNA, trace mineral analysis, and cell tower coverage reconstruction achieved higher accuracy did the seemingly disconnected pieces of evidence fit together into a unified model that clearly revealed Lauren's movements on the night she disappeared and Evan's role in each point he had tried to hide. They also emphasized the importance of strict long-term evidence preservation. The fact that the backpack, fabric, and personal items had been sealed according to proper procedures since 2004 allowed the 2018 forensic team to analyze them with modern techniques without fear of contamination. This is regarded as important proof of the value of long-term evidence storage in unresolved cases. In addition to forensic factors, the report highlighted logical analysis capabilities. Evan's inconsistent statements, when compared against objective data, became a key tool in narrowing the scope of suspicion. Re-examining a 2004 witness report that had previously been dismissed also demonstrated the importance of not overlooking small details, because in cold cases, clues that once seemed insignificant can become the key when placed in the right context. Finally, the DCI report concluded that the Lauren Halden case is a clear example of the value of next-generation forensics in resolving backlog cases. Touch DNA identified the suspect's presence at a critical location. Soil analysis located where evidence had been. Mineral analysis determined where evidence had been. Cell tower data reconstructed the route of travel, and exhumation of the body confirmed the endpoint of the chain of events. Together, they created a complete case file that could not have been assembled using traditional methods alone. When the 50-year sentence was handed down and the Lauren Halden file was officially closed after 14 years, the Grinnell community received the outcome not as a victory, but as the end of a long chapter shrouded in pain and mystery. For Lauren's family, the truth arrived late, but at least they now knew where their daughter rested and that justice had finally spoken. The case is over, but the investigative lessons it leaves behind have become the foundation for many other cold case investigations across Iowa, proving that even when time erases traces, science can still recover the truth. The story of the Lauren Halden case in Iowa, a file left unsolved for 14 years before being cracked by touch DNA, soil analysis, and cell tower data, reflects many very real aspects of present-day American society: the fragility of personal safety, the importance of transparency in investigations, and above all, the vital role of forensic science in protecting justice. In the story, Lauren disappeared right after an ordinary gathering in Grinnell, a quiet rural town like thousands of others across the United States. That detail reminds us that danger can arise even in places that seem safest, and the crucial thing is for everyone to maintain awareness of personal safety, especially when engaging in outdoor activities, traveling with someone not well known, or leaving an event at night. Evan's behavior, repeatedly changing his story, deliberately misleading police, and hiding Lauren's body, shows why collecting scientific evidence and preserving items long-term is essential. If the backpack had not been properly sealed, if the fabric had not been kept intact, or if the 2004 cell tower data had not been retained, this case might have been forgotten forever. The important lesson for today's American community is support authorities by reporting suspicious incidents, stay in touch with loved ones during travel, and understand that technology, from GPS and mobile data to forensics, is not just a convenience, but a critical layer of personal protection. The Lauren Halden case also reminds us that justice can sometimes be slow, but science can recover the truth, as long as society values data preservation, respects legal process, and does not dismiss small details. Ultimately, the story encourages us to live more cautiously, support our communities better, and trust that the truth, given enough time and the right tools, will always find its way back. Thank you for following to the end of the story. If you found value in cases brought to light through science and persistence like Lauren's, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new cases. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring how justice is brought into the light, no matter how many years it was buried.